Hello and welcome to Tower Thoughts from Rebellious Resources for recording this on July 17th. Let's see if the news changes before I finish this. But welcome. My name is Raina, and I am the owner of Rebellious Resources. We are disrupting money culture with the magical and the mundane. What does that even mean? So money culture is, if you've paid any attention to the news recently, is kind of what we see going banana balls right now. It's a few people at the top with all of the control, all of the resources, and everyone else underneath kind of scrambling just to survive. And that status quo needs to go. So our goal is to disrupt that. How do we do that? Why do we do that? Why? Well, because like screw that, screw the oligarchs. Not literally because ew, but how do we do that? So you can't name your company Rebellious Resources and take the conventional approach, and I do not. So blending politics, current events, history, economics, and yes, using tarot and astrology as supportive tools. Astrology, especially, is an amazing lens with which to view the patterns of history and see how they are repeating or rhyming nowadays. And if we want to change the outcome, if we want to uh, kind of harness that energy and use it to create the world we want to see, how do we do that? So that is what we do. And today, believe it or not, I am finally getting to record this. This is a video that I started pulling together the information back in March and is now July. And that kind of tells you how the year has been going. It's a little, it's been a thing. But anyway, we are going to take a look at the situation in Iran, the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. We're going to look at some of the history of that, the economics behind it, and the astrology, let me tell you, is fascinating. Now, if you're not an astrology person, that is okay. Please come and look because I think even if you're not, even if you've never seen a natal chart before, even if you think astrology is a bunch of donkey dust, there's still something fascinating about seeing it at work. And like I said, we're going to talk about all the other stuff too. So even if the woo is not for you, there's a lot of, wow, I didn't know that. So let's get started. I'm going to pull up slides because I like slides. Slides help me. Okay, and so as I should have also mentioned, yeah, we like spicy language around here. So if that's not for you, now is your time to grab the headphones, get off the channel, whatever, I don't know. Anyway, let's get going. Okay, so figure we would start with here, let me move my camera over here. Um, Start with just a recap of what is Iran. We hear the name, but we probably don't know a whole lot about the country. So the Islamic Republic of Iran is the full government name of the government, founded in April 1st, 1979. That does not mean the country has not existed before that. It has actually been there for thousands of years, but the government, the country that is organized as we know it today, was founded on April 1st, 1979, following the Iranian or Islamic Revolution that overthrew the last Shah of Iran. So in August of 1953, there had been a coup, and the Iranian prime minister was overthrown in a coup backed by the UK. Yes. Yes. Sorry. Yeah, this is also going to happen too, by the way, just so you know. I don't like to edit videos, so if I get lost, you're going to get lost with me. Because the world is not perfect and neither will my content. So here we go. Anyway, All of this was done to protect UK oil interests, and we're going to come back to that coup in a moment. Um, but eventually, there was the Iranian Revolution, which lasted from January 1978 to February 1979. Um, and after the coup, but before the revolution, um, Pahlavi, who was the Shah, had become more aligned with Western nations. Now, here's the thing. When you think of Iran today, you might think of, um, and this is, has to do a lot with how media represents things, but you might think of a country that is not as advanced, not as modern, not as artistic perhaps. And let me tell you, the Iran under the Shah, now it wasn't an authoritarian rule, but Iran was a very cosmopolitan, very modern, very stylish country. Um, like I said, he was more aligned with Western nations, but that doesn't mean they were aligned with democracy. Unfortunately, his regime was also very deadly and authoritarian, and that did spark a lot of backlash. And you're like, but wait a minute, how did that change? Look, fam, I know, I get it. Anyway, Iran, as we know it today, the Islamic Republic of Iran is considered a theocracy. So they do have a constitution that is based on Sharia Islamic law. It puts God above government. Pay close attention to who else might be trying to do some version of that. The supreme leader, who is known as the Ayatollah, and the Guardian Council, which is a select group of clerics, have the ultimate power to make all final decisions. So yes, there is technically a bicameral legislature, there is an assembly of experts, there is a president who is the head of government, and there is the judiciary branch. But we hear mostly about the Ayatollah because that is the person at the top, the supreme leader. So the government, after the revolution, created the Constitution in 1979, and it combines theocracy with these Republican elements, at least in theory. On paper, there are some democratic principles. In reality, in lived day-to-day lives, that's not entirely the case. Again, pay attention to other people, other places who might be trying to do the same thing. Iran has what's called a planned economy. So the government owns the oil industry. Iran is very rich in oil. They actually have the fourth largest oil reserves in the world. Their first successful well was tapped on in May of 1908. And yeah, this is a huge, huge resource for them. We're gonna come back to that a bit when we talk about the astrology because it's really interesting how this plays into their natal chart. And yes, countries, governments have natal charts as well. So yes, the government owns the oil industry, which is about 10% of the world's oil reserves. There are other large sectors like auto, turbines, other minerals. And this I didn't know. The government also owns the commercial fishing sector, and it's the world's number one source of caviar. If you are a caviar connoisseur, I am not. Anyway, that's a bit about Iran as a country, how their government operates, or at least on paper is structured on paper. Let's dig a little bit deeper though. So I said we're going to go back to that coup, and we are. So after that, those oil reserves were found. The Anglo-Persian Oil Company was founded in 1909. The United Kingdom, UK government purchased 51%. That's a controlling percentage in 1914. It was then renamed the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, AIOC, in 1935, and they were supposed to be paying royalties on the oil that was taken out and sold to Iran. But were they? That became a really, really big question. And so the Iranian prime minister tried to audit AIOC and audit their records to confirm that, in fact, the royalties that Iran was supposed to be getting paid were actually being paid. And he also wanted to limit the UK control of Iranian oil reserves, and the company refused. So, in response to that, the Iranian parliament voted to nationalize Iranian oil production and expel foreign oil corporations. They basically seized control of UK's Abadan oil refinery in Iran that is still in production, is the oldest and largest oil refinery in Iran. So if you need that on your double jeopardy question one night, there you go. And what they did was created the National Iranian Oil Company in 1951, NIOC. It's government owned, and it is the second largest behind Saudi Arabia's Aramco. Now, you might know the AIOC by a different name because once Iran took back control of their oil, the AIOC became British Petroleum, BP. So, yes, that company is in some versions still in existence today, but that is where it began on Iranian soil. So, there's some more little trivia for you. Anyway, after the after that all happened and Iran took back control of their oil, obviously the UK was not happy. So they went to initiate a global boycott of Iranian oil. Does that also sound familiar? And they prepared for military action. The US, however, wanted a coup. They wanted to overthrow the prime minister, which is ultimately what happened. So looking forward, how did we get to the 1970s? How did we get to that 1979 revolution? Well, there have there have always been conflicts and chaos and wars in, unfortunately, in the Middle East. You could say they've been in other places too, and yes, they have, but this is where we're talking about today. So what we're seeing go on is nothing new. And frankly, that kind of sucks. Like that's a pretty crappy thing to be carrying on for decades. So going back to 1949, the armistice agreements to end World War II also ended the first Arab-Israeli War and created what was called the Green Line separation. So that's also referred to as pre-1967 borders that set the border between Israel and its neighbors, Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria. However, in 1967, Six-Day War, and I am jumping ahead a little bit here, Israel added some more territory, including the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, East Jerusalem, and the Golan Heights. So this area has always been an area of conflict and of competing I don't want to say ownership, but maybe that's just the best word for right now. So anyway, those armistice agreements kept the peace for all of 7 years, and we had what was called the Suez Crisis. And what happened is Egypt, who's one of the neighbors, had restricted Israeli access to the Suez Canal. We're going to talk a little bit more about canals and straits in a moment, but for many of these countries, these waterways, these water access points are vital for trade, for their economy, and for importing resources that they need. So Egypt, which owns the Suez Canal, had restricted Israeli access to it and also to the Straits of Tiran. Israel then invaded Egypt, soon joined by the UK and France. Um, and I think it was yeah, so it was closed between October of 1956 and March of 1957. Flash forward to the Six-Day War, which sounds like, oh, that wasn't a big deal. Yes, it was. It was. So the Six-Day War, Israel successfully launches a surprise invasion of Egypt. After Egypt closes the Suez Canal, and that time the Suez Canal was actually closed from June 6, 1907 to June 5th, 1975. It was closed for 8 years. And we're going to take a look at why that mattered in a moment. So, or the impact that could have. So then in 1973, fighting still continues. There was the Yom Kippur War. Um, then the first was called the first oil crisis occurred in October 1973. There was a total embargo to any nation that supported Israel. The oil price per barrel shot up 300% by the end of the embargo, which was March 1974. If you were around at that time, or maybe your parents, grandparents, ask them about the oil crisis, ask them about, here in America, how that was handled. There was, I don't know if it was with both of them, but certainly I'm pretty sure it was at least the second one. There was gas rationing. So depending on your license plate number, odd license plates got could get gas on these days. Even license plates could get them on the other days. Um, and you know, 300% is a big deal. Now, if I recall correctly, I think it only went up to $12 per barrel. But that $12 represented a 300% increase. And obviously, oil has gone up since then. Everything has gone up, but and then finally we had the second oil crisis in 1979. That was a result of the global oil supply dropping after oil workers in Iran went on strike in 1978, which part of the prompting for the Iranian Revolution. So we saw the price per barrel double. That is also when the US embassy was taken hostage. Embassy workers were taken hostage, the Iranian hostage situation. Again, if you know anyone who was alive and kind of paying attention, ask them about that because that was a very, very big deal. So I wanted to review all this because what we're seeing now didn't just pop up out of nowhere. There is history with Iran, with other nations in that area, in the Arabian Peninsula, in North Africa, with Israel, with the UK, with France. And, history has a way of repeating or at least rhyming. And this is to an extent what we are seeing now. It's Anyway, that is some of the history behind it. So let's move on. So I wanted to talk about now taking it to where we are today. This is a look at global shipping. So we have tanker, cargo, and fishing in here. And right here is Africa. We have North America, South America over here. If I recall correctly, I think the red triangles are oil tankers and maybe the green are fishing. I don't know. I don't remember. Like I said, I started this in March and it's taken to July to get it out here, but here we are. Anyway, what we're going to focus on today is this area right over here. We're going to take a closer look at that, but I want you to just get a sense of the sheer magnitude of global shipping. Most of the imports and exports that we have Um, go via sea. We can't really afford to send them by plane, and that would be a lot of weight and a much smaller amount of product that would be going at any one time. So global shipping is really what the global economy runs on and what many national economies run on. So moving ahead, and here, yeah, so this is just taking a look at some of the different canals and straits that exist in the world. And you're like, well, what is the difference? Channels and straits are generally naturally existing small-ish waterways, whereas a canal is something that is has been artificially created, artificially produced. So the Suez Canal, the Panama Canal, those were created, those are owned and maintained by specific countries. There are costs involved with that. There are costs for maintenance of the canals and for sometimes piloting, having tugs bring ships through. So those there are fees to go through canals, and there's a limited number of ships and a limited size of ships that can go through canals. So Panama, it's a Panama Max. Suez is the Suez Max, or it's the Pan Max. I always forget those. Anyway, there's basically a size like this is the largest size tanker or ship or cargo carrier that can fit through this canal. And if it's larger, you've got to look at going an alternate route. Um, so that is uh, these are the straits. And again, we're looking largely at this region here. So let's zoom in on it. Okay, so here we have the area that is causing all the trouble right now, because it could be somewhere else in a minute. Up here, and I'm gonna move my video again. Maybe I am. Yes, sure I am. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Um, so right up here, we have the Strait of Hormuz, and that is where there have been repeated blockades, closures, openings, alleged minings, attacks, etc. Right up here is the Strait of Hormuz. Over here we have Oman. Over here we have Saudi Arabia. Now, Saudi Arabia has the good fortune to be able to access not only the Persian Gulf or the Middle East Gulf, if you're Lloyd's of London, this is the Persian Gulf right here. Saudi Arabia has access to that waterway as well as the Red Sea over here. But the Red Sea, on one end, we have the Suez Canal. Remember, that is a limited number of um, vessels that can fit through every day. There's a charge for going through, and there is a maximum size that can fit through. At the other end, we have the Bab el-Mandab. Cheers. If you know, you know. Um, that leads from the Red Sea into the Gulf of Aden. It is, however, over here is Yemen. And this is the area that has been largely closed down or constricted by the Houthis since at least 2023. So we have a lot of traffic over here that has never really returned to the pre-Houthi days. And Houthis are known for attacking ships over there. So that really reduced the amount of traffic that was getting through. And then when the US um, began its strikes on Iran, we had the same thing happen over here on the Strait of Hormuz. So all of this traffic is not really moving anymore. And you might be thinking, well, does it matter? These look like two pretty small waterways. Like, how much can actually come through here? quite a lot, quite a lot. So, no, please do. All right. So, taking a look at the Strait of Hormuz shipping. Um, Now we here in the US do not get a ton of things, or well, like we get several, technically we get several tons, but we don't get the majority of our imports coming through Strait of Hormuz or the Red Sea, but the rest of the world does. And so if the rest of the world is losing access to these goods, that is going to drain down the global supply. That is going to increase the overall global demand and the overall global pricing. That does impact us here in the US. So, crude and petroleum, about 20 million barrels per day moved through the Strait of Hormuz. That's 25% of the global seaborne oil and 20% of global oil consumption just through that one strait. That includes jet fuel, crude, refined oil. 84% of this went to Asian markets. Um, and this is the highest volume global oil choke point. So when it closes down, a lot of those Asian markets, depending on whether they do or do not have sufficient reserves, are going to feel the impact of that pretty darn quickly. Liquefied natural gas, so LNG. So about 20% of the global LNG trade goes through Strait of Hormuz. Again, 90% of this goes to Asian markets. Qatar is the second largest LNG exporter. Qatar is also in there on the Persian Gulf. They need to access the Strait of Hormuz to get ships in and out to their ports. LNG and naphtha are vital petrochemical feedstock. And yes, I misspelled that. We'll fix that later. They're, and oh wow, there's another typo. Yeah. So they're really important for packaging, plastic, and consumer goods. So if you're thinking, well, I don't really use a whole lot of gas, it is really hard for you not to use plastic, even if you actively try. I actively try, and it is almost impossible for me to have a plastic-free day if I am going out in the world. So naphtha is basically they're they look to me like little beads, but they're the base ingredient of creating plastic. So they're used in solvent and paint thinners, industrial degreaser for machines, gasoline blending, lighter fluid, and a vital component in plastics, which are literally in everything. Also in inks. I didn't get to add that, but think about, printing packaging, printing the labels for something. If naphtha is not getting into the supply chain to create these inks, to create this packaging, that is going to impact what can actually be sold, how it can be sold. Some things need to be in plastics for safety reasons. So when you think about it that way, there is actually a huge impact out of a Strait of Hormuz closure. And when it comes to container and cargo, they don't do a whole lot, but about 3.5% of the global container trade does move through the Strait of Hormuz. That's about 33 million containers per year. Wow, another typo. Oh my God. You know what? Listen, some days, some days. Anyway, in the Middle East, this is their primary transshipment nodes serving both East Africa and South Asia. So 65% of their cargo goes somewhere else. Put that all together prior to February 28th, when the first strikes began, U.S. strikes began on Iran. Around 138 commercial ships transited the Strait of Hormuz per day. We have not seen anywhere near that since then. And understand 138 ships average per day is what was needed to maintain the global supply chain. We are now several months um, without that, with a dramatically reduced shipping. So, where does that leave us? Okay, this is now we're going to move into the astrology portion because this is where I think it is really interesting to see how astrology is a lens, is an overlay of current events, historical events. Current events are really just history that's happening right now, and how they, um, yeah, please go away. Zoom, sometimes you're just too much. Please go. Thank you. Um, and I think it's really interesting to look at them through that lens. And again, if you're new to astrology, if you think it's a load of crap, that's totally fine. I think it is fascinating, and I'm inviting you to join me on this discussion. In the listening part, I'll do the talking. So, Islamic Republic of Iran. Um, what did I say? It was April 1st. I think that's what I said, April 1st, 1979. Um, this is the chart. There were a couple charts that I found, and this is the one this is why you need a time, a birth time to cast a chart. There were a few charts that I saw out there. This is the one that I saw most commonly, and this is the one that also makes the most sense for how Iran exists, how it expresses itself, how it interacts with others. So the first thing that we notice right over here is Iran has a 29-degree Leo ascendant. Ascendant is your rising. If you ever hear someone say, "What is your rising?" 29 degrees Leo is the Islamic Republic of Iran. Now, Leo is very proud. It is a fire sign. It is a fixed sign. It can be very stubborn. That can be good or not so good. We are coming up onto Leo season next week. And Leo can uh, Leo can be a wonderful sign, but they don't like to share the limelight. Every sign, every planet has, a positive expression and a more challenging negative expression. So at 29 degrees, that is the last degree of a sign, is called the degree of crisis and decay. 29 degrees can be really challenging. It is where the sign is basically dissolving before it transitions into the next sign, which is Virgo for this case. And having that as a rising, um, you know, could lead us to think, well, what are some qualities with that? Very proud, very bold, very fiery. Um, Also very stubborn, very determined, not going to back down. Very, um, Leo can be a bit childish. So there could be a bit of immaturity expressed. These may or may not be happening. I'm going to let you think about whether you feel like those are qualities that would apply here. But Leo is ruled by the sun, and in this case, the sun is at 11 degrees Aries. So again, another fire sign. That sun is living in the eighth house. The eighth house is one of the money houses, but it is one of the more maligned houses, in my opinion. It's a house that asks you to do really hard, deep work. It's the house of death, taxes, shared resources, the occult, things that are taboo, things that bring tremendous discomfort. And if you see how the country expresses itself, Um, that's not out of alignment. But I think is also interesting looking at the first house. So just right after that ascendant, we immediately begin the sign of Virgo. They have a natal Saturn in Virgo. I usually love Saturn. Saturn is called a malefic. It's considered one of the bad planets, and um, I think that is inaccurate, but it is the hard taskmaster. If you can work with that energy, Saturn is amazing for achieving goals, for achieving creating discipline. But if it's poorly expressed, it can be very restrictive, sometimes literally restrictive. And in Virgo, Virgo can be can be detail oriented, it can be organized, but it can also be highly, highly critical. So having a critical planet in a critical sign, I know people with Saturn and Virgo, and it is a challenge to be around them. So, seeing that in the first house is the house of identity. When you think about how Iran expresses itself, it is seen as a very restrictive, very critical country. And I think this is a really fascinating look in direct opposition to that Saturn is Venus, which can is sometimes representative of women. It's also a planet of money and beauty. But when you think about how repressive society is for women, that is also, you talk about living your chart. And that is creating a T-square with the moon in Gemini. Moon in Gemini, I think, also maybe gets a bad reputation, but Gemini can be gabby. Gemini always has something to say, and the moon is our emotions, it's the people. You know, Gemini also represents duality. So you think about, how do the people feel? The people of Iran feel. Um, that's in the 10th house. The 10th house is the house of the leader in mundane astrology. There are some people who probably truly love, the Ayatollah. That's perhaps all they've known. That is a sense of comfort for them, a sense of national identity. But there might be some people who do not love how restrictive and authoritarian this country is. So just moving through it a little bit more, we Iran just completed its Cancer return. Again, that Jupiter in Cancer is at 29 degrees, that anaretic degree. Just completed a um, a Uranus opposition. Uranus is the sign of rebellion. Uranus just finished its time in Taurus, and Taurus is all about our resources. The fact that we saw some uprisings and rebellions during the past few months is, to me, not surprising. Um, so yeah, we're going to come back to, oh, and that was the other thing I wanted to mention. So one thing that I think is very important to look at is Iran also has a Chiron in Taurus. They are entering their Chiron return. That means that transiting Chiron, which is up in the sky right now, is moving back into the sign of Taurus, the sign that it was in when this chart was cast, when Iran was formed. So they're going through a Chiron return. Chiron is um, about our wounds, about the things that we've perhaps struggled with that we haven't faced. Maybe we have. If we've done the work, a Chiron return can be really freeing. But if you haven't done the work, it can be incredibly painful. And again, Taurus is about our resources. It's a fixed earth sign. I do think the next few years are going to be quite the struggle bus for Iran. How that expresses itself, we're going to have to wait to find out. But I do think it is going to have to do a lot with their natural resources, with the resources that are, in the earth, and oil is certainly one of them. So, when did the Iran war begin? Well, that was February 28th, 2026. Now, I think it was the last video that I posted here, which I don't remember when that was, but I was looking at the chart of the US Constitution, which is the chart of our government, and that is going through some things. And I said, we're going to have our Mars return. Mars will be exact. So transiting Mars in the sky right now was going to be at the same sign and same degree as the natal Mars for our Constitution on February 28th. And I said, watch that date because a Mars return can be volatile. How it expresses itself, I'm not one who likes to try and predict exactly what's going to happen. There are too many variables. I like to look at the energy and say, how do we work with this? How do we be conscious of it and maybe be a little cautious? So if you want someone who is going to be trying to do specific predictions, there are plenty of folks here. Have at it. But I said that date, I don't like that date. What happened? Well, we went ahead and decided to start bombing Iran. So this is the chart for when the strikes began. And again, it's that Mars is at 28 degrees, which is the US Constitution, and our government has a natal 28 degrees Mars in Aquarius. Um, so what's that chart ruler? Sorry, what's the ascendant? The ascendant is in Sagittarius. Now, a Sagittarius energy. I love good Sagittarius energy, but it is spicy. Um, it is all about freedom. It is all about truth. At least their version of truth. That doesn't mean it's everyone's version of truth, but it is a fire sign. It's a mutable sign. It is all about change. It does not like to be constrained. It's kind of impulsive. It's going to do what it's going to do, and we're going to figure it out. It's going to be an adventure. Don't love that for freaking war. Like that sucks. So yeah, um, 24 degree, almost 25 degrees, Sagittarius rising, Sagittarius rules by Jupiter. So we go ahead and, oh, hey, it's that Jupiter in Cancer that I was talking about. So I think there are a couple, there are 3 points I want to point out here. So we have some conjunctions going on. We have that Sun at 9 degrees Pisces that is conjunct the North Node at 9 degrees Pisces. Sun is in mundane astrology is, like I said, about the ruler. So I feel like the ruler of the US was going to do this no matter what. They were going ahead, they were going forward. We also, and that is in, yes, I want to make sure. That's in the second house of resources. That's in the second house of money. And look at who, so I'm talking about this area right here. Look who else is in the second house. We have Mars. Hello. And we also have Pluto. Pluto is the planet of transformation. And Aquarius is, the sign of the collective. This is the sign of the people. Um, do you not feel like we, the people of the United States, are on board with this conflict? But we're going to have to decide how we want to deal with that. Um, Also, over here in the third house, which is the house of communications, we have Mercury at 22 degrees, um, which was retrograde at the time, not really a good time to start a war, and is conjunct Venus, which is also at 22 degrees Pisces. Now, Venus loves to be in Pisces. I don't know why. She is like the only one. Um, but Venus is also ruling money, peace, diplomacy. Um, it's we're going to talk a good game. We're going to talk about peace. We're going to talk about, well, how can we financially settle this? We're going to talk about all these things. But with this being, with this starting during a Mercury retrograde, those talks are going to get redone. People are going to go back on their word. And we've seen that's exactly what has happened with this conflict. We've had I don't know how many ceasefires, I don't know how many deals, how many, reworkings, and still like nothing positive has actually happened. And then the third conjunction over here, um, is our Saturn at 1 degree Aries is conjunct Neptune at 1 degree Aries. And this is a bigger story. So again, I mentioned Saturn is uh, can be restrictive. And Neptune, if you know anything about your mythology, Neptune, is the seas, but also Neptune is our dreams. It can be illusions, it can be delusions, cult-like behavior. But what I had said when both of these planets were entering Aries. Aries is a fire sign. Aries wants to go, Saturn wants structure. Neptune is very watery. It wants to flow. And Aries is a fire sign. Fire and water, you're getting steam, you're getting boiling. Aries is also martial. Um, it is the ruler of Mars. So when we were entering this phase, I said I can see, especially during this longer Neptune transit, but especially while Saturn is in Aries as well, we're going to see water as warfare, as a place of warfare, warfare over water, and water restrictions. And that has been what we've seen, not just simply with the Strait of Hormuz and with bombing ships, but think about what's going on with data centers. We're having a war over water rights. And, that might be new for some people, but it's not new for others. Water access, water rights, water protectors, these are um, topics that are going to get amplified certainly over the next 2 years while Saturn is in Aries, um, but really for much longer while Neptune is in Aries. But they are certainly the most intense right now, while the two are pretty close together. And Saturn is going to be going retrograde, I think, next week. So they're going to be getting close again. That's not going to be fun. Anyway, moving ahead. This is this is the chart of the Iran war. So as long as this war is active, and you can tell me there's been a ceasefire, we know there hasn't been. This chart is still active. So I can expect that we're going to be coming back to it and looking at how it is being impacted by transits. But what I wanted to go ahead and do is overlay those placements with the Islamic Republic of Iran's natal chart. So where is this hitting Iran in their natal chart? And this became really fascinating. So the chart here is Iran, and then everything on the outer edge is the chart of the war. So here we have those three conjunctions, in the seventh and eighth houses. The seventh house is all about our open enemies, our committed partnerships, our foreign partnerships. Um, Eighth house, like I said, is a really challenging one. And having that Saturn Neptune in a money house, financially, this war is going to have a significant impact. It has already, but I don't think that impact is going to be easing up anytime soon. Um, and look at Uranus right on the MC. This was probably a surprise. I don't know that anyone was expecting this. But I also don't think uh, that folks were expecting Iran to react the way that they have. The transiting moon is right on that natal Cancer, which is going through a Cancer return here. And um, I think one thing that perhaps this invasion has done, even if the um, even if the people of Iran are wanting a different way of life, um, I think they still love their homeland. And you can love your homeland, you can love your country, you can love your heritage, and be in disagreement with your government. Those things, yes, can coexist. But I think this has perhaps triggered a very large surge of national love, national emotion in the people. And you know, there were a couple of other things, but anyway, this is how it's going. So I don't even know how long I've been yammering, but we're gonna keep going. Anyway, this though is what I wanted to get to. So, looking back at Iran, remember I said that their chart has a 29-degree Leo ascendant. And that's a tough ascendant. But as soon as I saw that, I said, hold up a second. I know someone else with a 29-degree Leo ascendant, and it's not just some random person. It is someone who is actively involved in this situation. I want to go take a look at that. Well, you know them too. That's our national embarrassment. And they also have a 29-degree Leo ascendant. They also have Mars at 26 degrees in the 12th house. 12th house is another house that can be really challenging. It's considered the house of confinement, illness, self-undoing. Gotta just leave that one right there. And having Mars so close to the ascendant, it's going to give that personality a very combative expression. Also in that 12th house is Pluto. Pluto is death, transformation, money, power. Yeah, greed. And anyway, they also have a really challenging chart. If you'll notice right here, there's what's called a yod. A yod is an isosceles triangle, also called the finger of God, where it's two quincunx or 150-degree aspects with a sextile base in common. And right at the point, that's what's being pointed at. And right here it is the moon, their Sagittarius moon. Now, I take personal issue here because I have a Gemini sun that is opposite my Sagittarius moon, and I hate that, not that our charts are similar, but they're not dissimilar, and I just hate it. I hate it. So anyway, but that yacht is being bisected by that sun moon opposition, and in really close relationship to that sun is the north node and Uranus. So if you want to talk about how a birth chart tells you what what work perhaps someone is here for. Um, this person came here to be highly disruptive, and they are. Now, not everyone disrupts in the same way. I also came here to be highly disruptive, but I'm going about it a different path. Um, but anyway, I think their chart is very interesting. And when you look at the two of them side by side, um, you know, the placements are very different, but the houses are almost exactly the same. Again, they're just a few minutes apart from each other, but they both have a 29-degree Leo ascendant. So when we see that happen, it's almost like you're fighting against yourself. The way you would react is in many ways how they're going to react. Again, there are different placements within their charts, but that that core identity, that 29-degree Leo ascendant identity is still there. And I think that is something that neither side was expecting. And I have to be honest, I look at this is something called synastry, and I don't do it a whole lot, but at how charts work together, how people perhaps work together. I tend to look at them with how people and governments or people and events work together. But I have never, ever seen two main characters have the exact same degree in the exact same sign of their ascendant. And when we overlap them, this is what it looks like. This fustercluck right here is what it looks like. And I looked at this and I just kept hearing caught in a bad romance. And it's kind of like that um that Spider-Man, looking at each other, how can you fight yourself? They're like, it's shadow boxing. What is that? That Kermit with the hood, it's trying to fight against yourself. How you would overpower someone is how they're going to try and overpower you. And so no one's really gaining any footing. So when we overlap them, this is what I thought was really fascinating. Going ahead and looking at that second house. Again, it's a money house. It's the house of resources. It's, your values. Also think about a nation's values, a government's values. Um, the second house, Iran's Pluto, which I know is a little hard to see here. But Iran's Pluto at 18 degrees Libra is conjunct uh, our national embarrassments, Chiron at 14 degrees Libra and Jupiter at 17 degrees Libra. So when I see Chiron in a second house, that can be, again, Chiron is our unhealed wounds. Uh, Second house is money. That can be a sign that there are significant money wounds to work through, perhaps values around wounds around values and money and resources to work through. When you have Jupiter there, Jupiter expands, good or bad. I know it's called a benefic, but Jupiter is just going to make everything bigger. So if that is something that is positive, fantastic. If that's something that is not so positive, it's still going to enlarge it. And when you have Pluto, the planet of transformation, of death, of um power right over that, um, there's some triggering there. When we look ahead, I Iran's Uranus, which is the planet of rebellion, disruption, chaos, strikes. That is landing in the third house of communications. And I kept going back to those videos, those Lego videos that kept coming out, those AI generated Lego videos, were very unexpected, very rebellious communications. They were very disruptive. Um, and they were unexpected. That's a very Uranus in the third house. And with Uranus being in Scorpio, the fact that they were targeting all the taboo subjects, and I think they're still going around. I don't know if they're quite as popular as they were, but when, Scorpio, oh, do you want to keep that hidden? We're going to talk about it. Um, I thought that was a really interesting expression here, and it is quincunx, the that sun, that natal sun, north node Uranus conjunction up here. So there's a lot of triggering of the self, of discomfort, of you know, it's a very personally targeted attack meant to inflict an unexpected type of discomfort. So it's not, it's a Lego video. It's AI generated. They're not really gonna hurt you. But they are definitely going to hurt. So, and again, that opposition. So over here in the fourth house, we have Iran's Neptune. Neptune retrograde in Sagittarius. And let me tell you, that is a placement that suffers no bullshit. They are gonna just call it out. Now, again, you can have your opinions on Iran as a government. We are only talking about how they're handling this relationship, how these two charts are working together. And one of the things that I think has been really interesting is every time it is announced, oh, agreed to this, Iran's going to do X, Iran's going to do Y. Iran comes out and says, that's bullshit. We agreed to none of that, and we're going to call you on it. Instead of just going along like many other people do, they don't know how to react. They don't want to be uncomfortable. Iran's like, screw you. Yeah, fuck that. We didn't do that. We didn't do that. We don't agree to it. And, here's another Lego video that is landing on the moon of that is at the apex of that yod. So every time they push back, every time they call bullshit, every time they call out lies, and put out something that is um meant to talk about the truth of a situation. And again, truth is a very often malleable word, but from their perspective, that is absolutely triggering that whole yod. So moving ahead, there were just a couple other points here that I think are interesting. In the 11th house, Iran's Jupiter, remember at 29 degrees, don't love it. Cancer is a water sign. Uh, it is the sign of associated with home and family, um, and patriotism. So you can see really big patriotism, but very emotional patriotism, which is not always a healthy expression of it, is conjunct our national embarrassments. Venus, which is at 25 degrees Cancer, and Saturn, which is at 23 degrees Cancer, in that 11th house. That's the house of groups, communities, friends, um, uh, hope, or our goals. And, you know, um, I think perhaps the resistance of the Iranian people and their commitment to their country was unexpected. But moving ahead, this right here, I probably should have started this, but I wrote it last, so here we are. Right here, our 12th house and our first house. This is where, you know, those ascendants are meeting at 29 degrees Leo. But in here in the 12th house, we still have that natal Mars, and Pluto is coming up against the natal Saturn of Iran. Those are all the malefics. Those are the planets that are considered like the really hard, really bad. Again, I don't like that terminology, but knowing that both entities are not utilizing the best expression of those planets, um, this is just it's a lot. It's a lot. And so how does this move forward? This almost feels like a fight to the death. Death does not need to be literal. It can just be like until they exhaust one another. But no one's going to give up that pride, that ego, um that need for control, that need to win, that need to keep fighting is just going to be there, and they're gonna keep cycling through because remember, this started during a Mercury retrograde. It's just gonna keep cycling through. Unfortunately, the rest of us are getting fucked sideways by this. Um, how does it end? You know, I don't know. I don't know. They might just get to the point where if they both walk away and no one brings it up again, we can pretend it didn't happen. This this is that energy. I don't know if that it will happen that way. Um, but yeah, so that is okay, hold on one second. Going to okay. Um, so yeah. Um That I think is a really interesting way to look at what is going on. You can look at what are the numbers around shipping. You can look around, what does war risk insurance cost right now? What is the price of gasoline at the pump? What's the price of oil barrel futures on the stock market? Um, but when you look at the energy around the two main parties involved, and yes, I know that Israel is part of this too, and I could add them in. Maybe we'll talk about that in a future video. But when you look at the energies of the two main parties of Iran and of um our national embarrassment. Um, no one's going to let go. No one's going to step back. No one's going to try to achieve peace. No one is going to let their ego lose. That's not great. Um, so I think it will be interesting to see how things proceed. And this is again why I think astrology is so fascinating, so interesting, and such a unique lens at looking at history, current events, all of these things going on. So I hope you've enjoyed that. I hope you learned a little bit more about global politics, about global shipping, and about astrology. So thanks so much. We will see you again. If you want to learn more like this, you can go ahead, follow us on Patreon. I'm reworking the tiers right now, but we do have a free tier there for everyone. And you can just kind of join and see how it goes. And if you want to support, please consider joining a paid tier. We have monthly classes. You can register for those, even if you're not a Patreon member. So looking at economics and personal finance and other really cool things every month. So thanks so much. And thanks for watching Tower Thoughts. I'm Raina from Rebellious Resources, and we will talk again soon.